Books on Architecture presents the 4 Books on Architecture, Book 1 by Andrea Palladio. Andrea Palladio's 4 Books on Architecture is a seminal work in the field of architectural theory and practice. Published in 1570, this treatise profoundly influenced Western architecture and continues to be a cornerstone for architects and scholars. Palladio's work is divided into 4 books, each addressing a different aspect of architecture. Book 1 discusses the building materials and construction techniques of various architectural elements, such as columns, arcades, and staircases. It sets the foundation for understanding classical architecture. Book 2 focuses on the design of private urban and suburban residences. Palladio illustrates the principles of proportion and symmetry that define his approach to villa architecture. Book 3 covers public buildings, including bridges, basilicas, and piazzas. This book demonstrates how Palladio's principles can be applied to civic architecture to achieve both beauty and utility. Book 4 presents reconstructions of ancient Roman temples and buildings, emphasizing the importance of classical antiquity as a source of inspiration and instruction. Palladio's significance lies in his ability to reinterpret ancient Roman architecture in a way that was accessible and adaptable to contemporary needs. His emphasis on harmony and proportion influenced the development of neoclassical architecture and left an indelible mark on the architectural landscape of Europe and beyond. The principles outlined in his books continue to be studied and applied, making the 4 books on architecture an enduring legacy in the canon of architectural literature. To make the book easier to follow, we list some basic classical architectural terminology here that the author expects the reader to be familiar with. Architrave, the lowest part of the entablature, resting directly on top of the columns. It serves as a lintel or beam that spans the space between columns. Frieze, the middle section of the entablature, located above the architrave and below the cornice. It is often decorated with sculpted reliefs or ornamental designs. Cornice, the uppermost section of the entablature, projecting outward to throw rainwater off the building. It consists of a series of moldings and often includes a gutter. Vaults, arched structures that form a ceiling or roof. They are used to provide a space with a span wider than that of wooden beams and are commonly found in basilicas and cathedrals. Loggias, covered exterior galleries or corridors, usually open on one side to the air. They are supported by columns or arches and are often used as outdoor sitting areas. Pedestals, the base or support on which a column, statue, or obelisk is placed. They elevate the structure above the ground and can be square, rectangular, or cylindrical in shape. Pilasters, flat, rectangular columns that project slightly from a wall. They are used for decoration rather than structural support and mimic the appearance of a classical column. Intercolumniations, the spaces or intervals between columns. The width of these spaces can vary depending on the architectural order and the desired aesthetic or structural effect. For this audiobook, we updated the 1738 original English translation by Isaac Ware. We tried to avoid removing any meaning. Most chapters can be read using just audio, however, a few chapters reference images. We have added these images to the video. Please support the channel by liking the video and subscribe to the channel to be notified about similar videos. Thank you.
Preface, Isaac Ware, 1738, Original Translator's Preface. The works of the renowned Andrea Palladio, first published by him in Venice in 1570, have long been considered the definitive standard in architecture. With the original Italian version being quite rare, several attempts have been made to translate it into English and replicate his precise wooden prints using copper plates. 2 notable individuals have released what they claim to be Palladio's works. The first, and by far the superior of the 2, was completed in 1721 by Mr. Leoni. However, Leoni not only deviated from the original scale but also altered Palladio's elegant proportions in many instances. He diminished some measurements, enlarged others, and added his own imaginative decorations. His drawings are also notably inaccurate, making his work seem more like an original creation rather than an enhancement of Palladio. The second work, published in 1735, shows such a lack of understanding and care that it is likely to mislead the unskilled and offend knowledgeable readers. To honor Palladio and preserve his invaluable contributions, I undertook this extensive and demanding project. I have meticulously adhered to his proportions and measurements by carefully tracing all the plates from his originals and engraving them myself. This ensures that readers receive an exact replica of Palladio's work, without any alterations. I have neither altered nor corrected anything from this excellent artist. For the same reason, I have chosen to provide a strict and literal translation to convey Palladio's thoughts in his own words. Scotland Yard, June 1737. Andrea Palladio, 1570. The author's preface to the reader. Guided by a natural inclination, I devoted myself to the study of architecture from a very early age. I have always believed that the ancient Romans excelled in many fields, including architecture, far surpassing those who came after them. For this reason, I chose Vitruvius as my master and guide, the only ancient writer on this art, and diligently examined the remains of ancient buildings that have survived time and barbarian invasions. Discovering these ruins to be even more worthy of study than I initially imagined, I meticulously measured every part of them. I became so deeply absorbed in this examination, finding nothing that was not done with reason and beautiful proportion, that I frequently traveled throughout Italy and beyond to fully understand these ancient works and translate them into design. Observing how much contemporary building practices differed from my findings in the teachings of Vitruvius, Leon Battista Alberti, and other esteemed writers who followed him, I was compelled to share my knowledge. I have practiced these principles with great satisfaction and applause from those who have used my works. Believing that a man should not live for himself alone, but also for the benefit of others, I decided to publish the designs of these buildings, which I had spent so much time collecting and studying. In doing so, I aimed to provide concise insights into their most noteworthy aspects and to outline the rules I observe in building. This way, readers of my books can utilize what is good and improve where I may have fallen short. Gradually, we can abandon strange abuses, barbaric inventions, excessive expenses, and more importantly, avoid the frequent and continuous collapses seen in many structures. I undertook this endeavor with great enthusiasm, as many people today are dedicating themselves to this profession, many of whom are honorably mentioned in the books of Messer Giorgio Vasari Aretino, a distinguished painter and architect. I hope that the practice of building will universally improve and reach the desired level of perfection in all arts. This goal seems within reach, especially in Italy, where the arts flourish. In Venice, for example, buildings increasingly exhibit quality since Messer Giacomo Sansovino, a renowned sculptor and architect, introduced beautiful styles. This is evident in his many works, including the new Procurazia, arguably the most richly adorned building since ancient times. Likewise, Vicenza, though not a large city, is home to noble intellects and ample wealth, where I first practiced what I now publish for general benefit. There one can see many beautiful structures and notable figures such as Signor Giovan Giorgio Trissino, the Thani brothers, and Signor Antonore Pagello, among others, who have immortalized their memory in magnificent buildings. Returning to our subject, I am publishing my lifelong work of examining and measuring ancient buildings with the utmost care and diligence. In these volumes, I will discuss architecture as clearly and systematically as possible, beginning with private houses. It is logical to start here because private homes likely led to the development of public buildings. Initially, people lived individually, but over time, seeking happiness and support, they naturally formed communities. From individual homes came villages, then cities, and eventually public buildings and spaces. Given that private houses are the most essential and frequently used aspect of architecture, I will first cover them before moving on to public buildings. I will briefly address streets, bridges, piazzas, prisons, basilicas, places of justice, Xisti, palestra, exercise areas, temples, theaters, amphitheaters, arches, baths, aqueducts, and city and seaport fortifications. Throughout these books, I will avoid unnecessary words, providing only the most essential directions and using terms commonly understood by artisans today. I cannot promise more than the dedication, great effort, and love I have invested in understanding and practicing what I now share. If God wills that my efforts are not in vain, I will be deeply grateful. I also acknowledge my debt to those whose brilliant inventions and experiences have left us the precepts of this art, opening an easier path to new discoveries. Thanks to them, we have learned many things that might otherwise have remained hidden. The first part of this work is divided into 2 books. The first book discusses the preparation of materials and their use from foundation to roof, providing universal precepts for all buildings, both private and public. The second book addresses the types of buildings suitable for different social ranks, starting with city dwellings and then moving to the most advantageous locations for villas and their arrangements. Since we have few ancient examples to follow, I will include plans and elevations of many buildings I have designed for various patrons, as well as designs of ancient houses and their most notable features, in the manner that Vitruvius describes. Chapter 1. Considerations and Preparations. Before building, great care must be taken before beginning any construction, focusing on the various parts of the plan and elevation of the entire edifice. According to Vitruvius, 3 things must be considered in every structure: utility, durability, and beauty. A building cannot be considered perfect if it is useful but not durable, durable but not useful, or if it possesses both qualities but lacks beauty. A building is considered commodious when every part or component is in its proper place and appropriate situation, neither above nor below its intended function and dignity. This includes ensuring that loggias, halls, chambers, cellars, and granaries are conveniently arranged and properly located. The strength or durability of a building depends on walls being built upright, thicker at the base than at the top, with strong and solid foundations. It is important to place upper columns directly over those beneath them and align the openings of doors and windows. This ensures that solid structures are supported by solid structures and voids align with voids. Beauty arises from the harmonious form and correspondence of the whole structure, with each part relating appropriately to the others and the whole. The building should appear as a complete entity, where every component is in agreement and necessary to the overall design. After examining these aspects through a model or draft, an exact calculation of the total expense should be made, and timely provision should be made for the necessary funds and materials. This prevents any delays in the completion of the work. Building with speed and efficiency ensures that the walls settle evenly, avoiding the cracks commonly found in buildings constructed over extended periods. Selecting the most skilled artists to advise on the project will ensure the work proceeds judiciously. Sufficient quantities of timber, stone, sand, lime, and metals should be procured. Specific guidelines will be provided for these provisions. For framing floors, there should be enough joists spaced so that the distance between each joist is 1.5 times the width of a joist. When constructing door and window jambs, use stones that are no larger than 1/5 or smaller than 1/6 of the opening. If the building will be adorned with columns or pilasters, use stone for the bases, capitals, and architraves, and brick for the other parts. As the walls are built, their thickness should gradually decrease proportionally. This careful planning helps make a more accurate cost estimate and reduces unnecessary expenses. While more detailed discussions on these specifics will be provided under their respective topics, this overview offers a general sketch of the entire structure. The quality and suitability of materials must also be carefully considered, choosing the best available. Learning from the experience of other buildings will greatly assist in determining the best practices. Although Vitruvius, Leon Battista Alberti, and other excellent writers have provided useful guidelines for selecting materials, I will highlight the most essential aspects to ensure nothing is overlooked in this treatise. Chapter 2. Timber. Vitruvius advises in the 9th chapter of his 2nd book that timber should be felled in autumn or during the winter season, specifically during the waning phase of the moon. During this time, the trees regain the vigor and solidity that were dispersed among their leaves and fruit in spring and summer. Additionally, the timber will be free from certain moisture that can foster worms and rot, as this moisture will have been consumed and dried up. Timber should be cut up to the middle of the pith and left to dry thoroughly so that the moisture, which causes decay, can gradually distill and evaporate. Once felled, timber must be stored in a suitable place, sheltered from the southern sun, high winds, and rain. Timber of spontaneous growth should be fully dried and coated with cow dung to prevent splitting. It should not be moved through dew, but rather in the afternoon. Additionally, it should not be worked on when wet and damp or extremely dry, as the former can lead to rotting and the latter to poor craftsmanship. Timber will not be dry enough to be used for planks in floors, windows, and doors until it has dried for at least 3 years. Those planning to build should consult with experts knowledgeable about the nature of timber to determine which types are suitable for specific uses. Vitruvius provides many other useful guidelines in the aforementioned chapter, and other learned individuals have also written extensively on this subject. Chapter 3. Stones. Stones are either natural or artificially made by human effort. Natural stones are extracted from quarries and used to make lime, which will be discussed later, and to build walls. Walls are commonly constructed from marble, hard stone, also known as live stone, or softer, more tender stone. Marble and live stone should be worked on as soon as they are taken out of the quarry, as this is much easier than after they have been exposed to the air for some time. Softer stones, however, should be dug up in summer and stored under proper shelter for 2 years before use. This gradual hardening process, protected from high winds, rain, and frosts, especially when the stone's nature is unknown or it comes from a newly opened quarry, makes them more resistant to weather. The reason for storing stones for so long is to sort them. Damaged stones can be used in the foundations, while undamaged ones can be used above ground, ensuring their longevity. Artificial stones, commonly called quadrelli or bricks due to their shape, should be made from chalky, whitish, and soft earth, dug up in autumn and tempered in winter. This preparation allows the earth to be conveniently worked into bricks in the following spring. Avoid earth that is too fat or sandy. If bricks must be made in winter or summer, cover them carefully, with dry sand in winter and with straw in summer. Bricks require a long time to dry, ideally under good shelter, to ensure even drying and hardening inside and out, a process that takes at least 2 years. Bricks come in various sizes depending on the building's quality and their intended use. The ancients made larger bricks for public and grand buildings and smaller ones for private structures. Larger bricks should have holes made in them to aid drying and burning. Chapter 4. Sand. There are 3 common types of sand: pit sand, river sand, and sea sand. The best of these is pit sand, which can be black, white, red, or ash-colored. The ash-colored variety is a type of earth calcined by subterranean fires found in the mountains and extracted from pits in Tuscany. In Terra di Lavoro, in the regions of Baia and Cuma, there is a special kind of sand called pozzolana vitruvius. This sand immediately cements in water, making buildings very strong. However, long experience has shown that among the various types of pit sand, white is the worst. The best river sand is found in rapid streams and under waterfalls, as it is most thoroughly cleansed. Although sea sand is generally the worst, the best type is blackish and shiny like glass, with larger grains found near the shore. Pit sand, being the richest, makes the most tenacious cement, and is therefore used in walls and long vaults, though it is prone to cracking. River sand is ideal for covering and rough casting walls. Sea sand quickly wets and dries and deteriorates due to its salt content, making it unsuitable for supporting any significant weight. Good sand feels crisp when handled, and, when laid on white cloth, will stain or leave earth behind. Bad sand, when mixed with water, will turn turbid and dirty. Additionally, sand that has been exposed to the weather for a long time is poor quality, as it will contain so much earth and decayed moisture that it will promote the growth of shrubs and wild fig trees, which are very harmful to buildings. Chapter 5. Lime, and of the method of working it into mortar. The stones used to make lime are either quarried from hills or taken from rivers. The best stones from hills are dry, brittle, and free from moisture or any substances that, when burned, diminish the stone. The highest quality lime comes from the hardest, most solid, and whitest stone, which, when burned, becomes 1/3 lighter than the original stone. There is also a spongy type of stone that produces excellent lime for covering and rough casting walls. Another variety is the scaly, rugged stone from the hills of Padua, which makes superior lime for buildings exposed to the weather or underwater, as it sets immediately, hardens quickly, and is very durable. Stones extracted from the earth are generally better for making lime than those collected from the surface, especially those from shady, moist pits rather than dry ones. White stones are preferable to brown ones as they are easier to work with. Pebbles found in rivers and fast streams make excellent lime and produce very white, neat work, making them ideal for rough casting walls. All stones, whether from hills or rivers, burn at different rates depending on the intensity of the fire, but typically calcine in about 60 hours. Once calcined, the stones must be wetted gradually to slack them, avoiding adding all the water at once to prevent burning before they are well tempered. After slacking, the lime should be stored in a moist, shady place, lightly covered with sand, and kept free from any impurities. When used, the more the lime is mixed with sand, the better it will cement. However, lime made from scaly stone, like that from Padua, must be used immediately after slacking to prevent burning and deterioration. To make mortar, mix lime with sand in the following proportions: 3 parts of pit sand to 1 part lime, or 2 parts of sea or river sand to 1 part lime. Chapter 6. Metals in Buildings. The metals commonly used in construction are iron, lead, and copper. Iron is used to make nails, hinges, bars, gates, bolts, and similar items. Iron is never found in a pure state. When extracted from the earth, it must first be melted and purged of its dross by fire to make it suitable for use. Once purified, iron can be heated to a red-hot state, making it soft enough to work and spread under the hammer. If not properly hammered while red-hot, it can burn and waste away. Good iron has straight, uninterrupted veins when reduced into bars, with clean ends free from dross. These characteristics indicate that the iron is free from lumps and flaws. When worked into square plates or other shapes, straight and even sides suggest uniform quality throughout. Magnificent palaces, churches, towers, and other public buildings are often covered with lead. Lead is also used for pipes and gutters to convey water and to secure hinges and ironwork in door and window jambs. There are 3 common types of lead: white, black, and ash-colored. Black lead is not truly black, but contains some blackness. The ancients distinguished it from white lead by this name. White lead is more perfect and valuable, while ash-colored lead is intermediate between the two. Lead is found either as large masses without impurities or as small, shiny blackish lumps. It can also be found in small flakes attached to rocks, marble, and stones. All types of lead melt easily, liquefying before becoming red hot. If placed in an extremely hot furnace, lead will not retain its substance, but will turn into litharge and dross. Of the 3 types, black lead is the softest and heaviest, spreading easily under the hammer. White lead is harder and lighter, while ash-colored lead is harder than white and of intermediate weight. Public buildings are sometimes covered with copper. The ancients also made nails and cramps from copper, which were used to secure stones in place, making structures appear as one solid piece and enhancing their strength and durability. Copper nails and cramps were preferred over iron because copper is less prone to rust and lasts longer. Letters for inscriptions on buildings were made of copper, and historical records mention that the famous gates of Babylon and Hercules' pillars in the island of Gades were made of this metal. The best copper is extracted and purified from ore by fire. High-quality copper is red with a yellowish tint, well-grained, and full of pores, indicating it is free from dross. Copper, like iron, can be heated to a red-hot state and liquefied for casting. However, it cannot endure extreme heat without consuming away. Despite being hard, copper can be hammered into very thin plates. To preserve copper, it is best to dip it in tar, as it is prone to verdigris, a type of rust, especially if touched by any sharp liquid. Copper mixed with tin, lead, and brass, which is copper-colored with lapis calaminaris, forms bronze or bell metal. This alloy is often used in architecture for bases, columns, capitals, statues, and similar ornaments. In Rome's Church of St. Giovanni Laterano, there are 4 brass columns, one with its capital, made by Augustus from the metal found in the prows of ships taken from Mark Antony in Egypt. 4 ancient gates remain in Rome: the Rotunda, formerly the Pantheon, St. Adriano, formerly the Temple of Saturn, St. Cosmo and St. Domiano, formerly the Temple of Castor and Pollux or Romulus and Remus, and St. Agnes, now called St. Agnes, outside the Viminalis Gate on Via Numenta. The most beautiful gate is that of Santa Maria Rotunda, where the ancients imitated Corinthian metal, predominated by gold's natural color. When Corinth, now Coranto, was destroyed, its gold, silver, and copper melted and combined into a mass, creating three types of Corinthian brass. The first type, predominated by silver, retained its whiteness and luster. The second, with more gold, retained a yellow color. The third type mixed all three metals equally. These types of brass were later imitated by various craftsmen. Having thoroughly covered the various particulars and materials essential for preparation before beginning construction, it is now fitting to discuss the foundations, as they are the basis upon which the entire structure will be built. Chapter 7. Qualities of the ground where foundations should be laid. Foundations are the basis of any structure, the part under the ground that supports the entire building above. Of all the errors that can be made in construction, those made in the foundation are the most detrimental, as they can lead to the ruin of the entire structure and are exceedingly difficult to rectify. For this reason, the architect must exercise the utmost diligence in this area. In some locations, natural foundations exist, while in others, artificial measures are required. Natural foundations occur when building on a chalky soil, which somewhat resembles stone. These natural foundations, without the need for digging or other artificial assistance, are inherently strong and sufficient to support any large structure, whether on land or in water. However, when natural foundations are not available, artificial measures must be employed. Construction sites may consist of solid ground, gravel, sand, or moist and marshy soil. For solid ground, the foundation need only be as deep as the quality of the building and the solidity of the ground require, as determined by the architect's judgment. This depth should not exceed 1/6 of the total height of the building if there are no cellars or subterranean structures needed. Observations made during the digging of wells, cisterns, and similar excavations are valuable for assessing the ground's solidity. The types of herbs growing naturally on the site can also indicate soil quality, especially those that thrive only in hard and firm soil. The solidity can further be tested by placing a heavy weight on the earth. If it neither shakes nor resounds, observed using a drum placed on the ground that should not move or sound, nor disturb water in a nearby vessel, it suggests solid ground. The adjacent areas can also provide clues about the soil's quality. For sandy or gravelly sites, the approach varies depending on whether the location is on land or in water. On land, the same considerations for dry ground apply. However, for buildings in rivers, sand and gravel are unsuitable due to the shifting nature of riverbeds. In such cases, digging must continue until a firm bottom is reached. If this is not feasible, some sand and gravel should be removed, and oak piles driven in until they reach solid ground, providing a base for construction. When building on boggy soil, excavation must continue until firm ground is reached, proportionate to the wall thickness and building size. Suitable soil for sustaining buildings comes in various forms. As Alberti notes, some soils are so hard that iron tools can barely cut through them, while others are softer, blackish, or whitish, the latter being the weakest. The best soil is hard to cut and does not dissolve into mud when wet. No construction should proceed on ruins without first determining their depth and suitability to support the new structure. In soft, sinking ground, like in bogs, piles must be used. Their length should be 1/8 of the wall height and their thickness 1/12 of their length. Piles should be driven close together, leaving no gaps, and hammered with frequent, moderate blows to better bind the earth around them. Piles should be used not only under the external walls, but also under the internal walls dividing the structure. If the internal and external foundations differ, the internal walls may sink while the piled external walls remain stable, leading to visible damage and structural failure. This can be prevented with a relatively small additional expense on piling. Piles for internal walls can be smaller than those for external walls, proportional to the wall sizes. Chapter 8. Foundations. Foundations should be twice as thick as the wall they are intended to support. The thickness must also account for the quality of the ground and the size of the edifice, making them wider in soft soils and very solid where they need to support considerable weight. The bottom of the trench must be level to ensure the weight is evenly distributed, preventing one side from sinking more than the other, which could cause the walls to open. The ancients used to pave the trench bottom with Tevertino stone, while today we often use beams or planks to achieve the same effect. Foundations should taper as they rise, diminishing in proportion, but ensuring that the offsets on both sides are equal. This way, the middle of the wall above aligns perfectly with the middle of the wall below, enhancing the building's strength. This principle should also be followed for the walls above ground, as it significantly strengthens the structure compared to other methods of tapering. In some cases, especially in marshy areas or where columns are present, the foundations may not be continuous to reduce costs. Instead, arches are used over which the building is constructed. For large structures, it is advisable to include cavities within the thickness of the walls from the foundation to the roof. These cavities allow winds and vapors to pass through, minimizing potential damage to the building. They also reduce costs and are useful if circular stairs are needed from the foundation to the top of the edifice. Chapter 9. Of the several sorts of walls. The foundations being laid, we are next to treat the upright wall above ground. The ancients had 6 sorts of walls, the first called reticulata, the second of baked earth or square bricks, the third of rough stones either from mountains or rivers, the fourth of irregular stones, the fifth of squared stones, the sixth called riempiuta. The first, called reticulata, is not in use in our time, but because Vitruvius mentions its being commonly used in his, I have given a draught of it. They made the corners or angles of the building of bricks, and between every 2.5 feet, 3 courses of square bricks were laid, which bound the thickness of the wall together. Plate 1a, the angles made of brick. B, courses of bricks that bind the whole wall. C, the network. D, courses of bricks through the thickness of the wall. E, the inner part of the wall, made of cement. The brick walls of a city, or any other great building, should be made with square bricks on both sides, and the middle filled up with cement and pounded bricks. To every 3 feet in height there must be 3 courses of larger bricks than the others, which take the whole thickness of the wall. The first course must be with headers, that is, the smallest end of the brick outwards, the second long way, or stretchers, and the third headers again. After this manner are the walls of the rotunda, the baths of Diocletian, and all the ancient buildings that are at Rome. Plate 2e, the courses of bricks that bind the whole wall. F, the middle part of the wall made of cement between the several courses and the outward bricks. The walls built of cement must so be made that to every 2 feet at least there may be 3 courses of bricks, placed according to the method above mentioned. Thus in Piedmont are the walls of Turin, which are built with large river pebbles, split in the middle, and placed in the wall with the split side outwards, making the work very upright and even. The walls of the arena, or amphitheater, in Verona are also of cement, and at every 3 feet distance are 3 courses of bricks. In like manner are other ancient fabrics made, as may be seen in my books of antiquity. Plate 3, G cement, or river pebbles. H courses of bricks, that bind the whole wall. Those walls were said to be uncertain, which were made of stones of unequal angles and sides. To make those walls they used a squaring rule of lead, which being bent where the stone was to be placed, served them in squaring it. This they did that the stones should join well together, and that they might not be obliged to make frequent trials whether the stone was rightly placed. There are seen at Praenesta walls after this manner, and the ancient roads and streets were thus paved. Plate 4, irregular or rough stones. Walls may be seen, built with squared stones at Rome, where stood the Piazza and the Temple of Augustus, in which the lesser stones are keyed in with some courses of the larger. Plate 5K, courses of the lesser stones. L, courses of the larger stones. The method the ancients made use of to build the walls, called riempiuta, or cofferwork, was by placing 2 rows of planks edgeways, distant the one from the other according to the thickness they intended to give the walls, and then filled the void with cement, mixed with all kinds of stones, and continued it in this manner from course to course. Walls of this kind may be seen at Sirmion, upon the lake of Garda. Plate 6, M planks laid edgeway N, inward part of the wall, O face of the wall, the planks being taken away. The walls of Naples, that is, the ancient ones, may be said to be after this manner, which have 2 walls of squared stones, 4 foot thick, and 6 foot distant the one from the other, bound together with others that run cross them. The coffers that remain between the traverse and out walls are 6 foot square, which are filled up with stones and earth. Plate 7p. The outward stone walls Q. The traverse stone walls to bind them together. R. The coffers filled with stones and earth. These, in fine, are the different sorts of walls the ancients made use of, footsteps of which still remain, from which we may conclude that all walls, let them be of what kind soever, ought to have some cross courses, as so many ligaments to bind all the other parts together. This must particularly be observed in brick walls, that should be the middle of the walls. Through length of time, sink or decay, the rest may not be subject to ruin, as we see happens in many walls, particularly on the side facing the north. Chapter 10. On the method observed by the ancients in erecting stone edifices. When an edifice is to be built entirely or partially with marble or large stones, it is crucial to understand the method the ancients used, as their works show an exemplary level of care in joining stones. This meticulousness made the junctures almost imperceptible, ensuring both beauty and the solidity and longevity of the structure. From my observations, the ancients first worked and squared the sides of the stones that were to be laid upon one another, leaving the other sides roughly hewn. This approach made the edges thicker and stronger, allowing the stones to be more easily maneuvered into place without breaking, which would have been a risk if all sides were fully polished and thinned. This method was used for constructing rough or rustic edifices. Once the structure was completed, they polished the exposed sides of the stones. Ornaments such as roses between modillions and other carved details in the cornice were crafted while the stones lay on the ground, as they could not be as conveniently worked once fixed in place. This practice is evident in the many unpolished stones found in ancient buildings. Examples include the arch near the old castle in Verona and other ancient arches and edifices in the area, where tool marks on the stones reveal their working method. The Trajan and Antonine columns in Rome were also constructed this way, achieving an exact fit of joints across the heads and other parts of the figures, which would have been impossible otherwise. For large structures like the arena in Verona, the amphitheater of Pola, and similar edifices, the ancients economized time and resources by only fully working the imposts of the arches, capitals, and cornices, leaving the rest rustic. Their focus was on the overall form and beauty of the building. However, for temples and structures requiring more delicacy, the ancients spared no effort, smoothing and polishing even the flutes of the columns with utmost care. In my opinion, brick walls and chimney mantles should never be made rustic, as these elements need to be worked very neatly. Making them rustic would misapply the technique and give the appearance of division in what should be a seamless piece. Depending on the size and quality of the building, it can either be rustic or very neat. What the ancients practiced out of necessity for their large structures should not be imitated in smaller buildings where neatness is particularly essential. Chapter 11. Diminution of walls and their various parts. Walls should be constructed to diminish in thickness as they rise. Above-ground walls should be half as thick as the foundation walls. The walls of the second story should be half a brick thinner than those of the first story, continuing in this manner to the top of the building. However, care must be taken to ensure that the upper part is not too thin. The middle of the upper walls should align directly with the middle of the lower walls, giving the whole structure a pyramidal form. If you want the upper wall's surfaces to align directly with the lower wall's surfaces, this adjustment should be made towards the inside of the building. This way, the floors, beams, rafters, vaults, and other supports will help keep the walls stable and prevent them from falling or giving way. The set-off or discharged part on the outside can be covered with a fascia and a cornice, which, by encircling the entire building, will serve both as an ornament and a structural bond. Since the angles incorporate elements from both sides, they should be reinforced with long, hard stones to keep them upright and tightly connected, effectively holding them together. Windows and other openings should be placed as far from the angles as possible. At the very least, the distance between the opening and the angle should be equal to the width of the opening itself. Having discussed plain walls, we will now consider their ornaments. Among these, columns are particularly significant when properly placed and proportioned to the entire building. Chapter 12. The five orders used by the ancients. The Tuscan, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, and Composite are the five orders used by the ancients. These orders should be arranged in a building so that the most solid are placed at the bottom, providing the strongest foundation for the structure. Thus, the Doric should always be placed under the Ionic under the Corinthian, and the Corinthian under the Composite. The Tuscan order, being plain and rudimentary, is rarely used above ground except in villas, where only one order is employed. In large buildings such as amphitheaters, where multiple orders are required, the Tuscan can be used in place of the Doric beneath the Ionic. If you choose to omit any of these orders, for example, placing the Corinthian directly above the Doric, you may do so, provided you always place the strongest and most solid order at the bottom for the reasons mentioned above. I will describe the measurements and proportions of each of these orders, drawing not only from Vitruvius, but also from my own observations of several ancient edifices. However, I will first discuss the general principles that apply to all of them. Chapter 13. The swelling and tapering of columns and of the intercolumniations and pilasters. Columns in each order should be designed so that the diameter at the top is smaller than at the bottom, with a slight swelling in the middle. This tapering ensures structural integrity and aesthetic appeal. When tapering columns, note that the higher the column, the less it should taper, due to the visual effect of height and distance. For a column 15 feet high, divide the bottom diameter into 6.5 parts, with 5.5 parts as the top diameter. For columns between 15 to 20 feet, divide the bottom diameter into 7 parts, with 6.5 parts for the top. For columns 20 to 30 feet high, divide the bottom diameter into 8 parts, with 7 parts for the top. This proportional tapering continues as the height increases, as Vitruvius explains in the second chapter of his third book. Regarding the swelling in the middle, Vitruvius provides no specific method, leading to differing opinions among writers. My method for profiling this swelling is as follows. Divide the column shaft into 3 equal parts, leaving the lower third perpendicular. Apply the edge of a thin rule, the same length or slightly longer than the column, to the side of the lower third, bending it from this point upwards until it touches the top point of the column's taper under the collarino. Mark the curve as directed by this bending, giving the column a graceful swell. This method, confirmed by Signor Pietro Cattaneo in his treatise on architecture, ensures a pleasing and practical design. A. The third of the column left directly perpendicular. B. The 2/3 that are tapered. C. The point of taper under the collarino. Intercolumniations, or the spaces between columns, may vary. 1.5 times the diameter of the column, measured at the base. 2 diameters, 2.25 diameters, 3 diameters. Ancients rarely exceeded 3 times the diameter for intercolumniations, except in the Tuscan order where timber architraves allowed larger spaces. They also never allowed less than 1.5 diameters, especially for tall columns. The preferred and most elegant spacing was 2.25 diameters. There should be a proportionate relationship between the intercolumniations and the columns. Small columns in large spaces lose their visual impact due to excessive air and space. Conversely, narrow spaces make columns appear clumsy. Therefore, if the spacing exceeds 3 diameters, the columns should be 1/7 of their height. If the spacing is 3 diameters, the columns should be 7.5 or 8 diameters high, as in the Doric order. For 2.25 diameters, columns should be 9 diameters high, as in the Ionic order. For 2 diameters, columns should be 9.5 diameters high, as in the Corinthian order. For 1.5 diameters, columns should be 10 diameters high, as in the Composite order. These proportions serve as examples of the different intercolumniations mentioned by Vitruvius. An even number of columns should always be placed at the front of edifices, allowing for a slightly larger central intercolumniation to better frame the doors and entries usually located in the middle. This arrangement suffices for simple colonnades. When using pilasters in loggias, ensure the pilaster thickness is no less than 1/3 of the space between pilasters, with corner pilasters 2/3 of this space for structural strength. For very large buildings, pilasters should be half the void space, as seen in the Theatre of Vicenza and the amphitheater at Capua. Otherwise, they should be 2/3 of the void space, like those in the Theatre of Marcellus in Rome and the Theatre of Ogubio, now owned by Signor Ludovico de Gabrielli. Ancients sometimes made pilasters as thick as the entire void space, as in the Theatre of Verona. In private buildings, pilaster thickness should be between 1/3 and 2/3 of the void space, ideally square. To reduce expense and increase walking space, pilasters can be thinner on the flank than the front. Half columns and pilasters in the middle can support the cornice over the loggia arches, with thickness proportionate to their height. For clarity and to avoid repetition, I use a module based on the column's bottom diameter. Divided into 60 minutes for all orders except the Doric order, where the module is half the diameter, divided into 30 minutes. This standard measure, adaptable by size for different buildings, ensures consistent proportions and profiles for each order. Chapter 14. The Tuscan Order. The Tuscan order, according to Vitruvius, is the simplest and plainest of all the architectural orders. It retains an ancient simplicity, lacking the elaborate ornaments that characterize the other orders. It was first developed in Tuscany, a noble region of Italy, from which its name is derived. The columns, along with their base and capital, should be 7 modules in height and taper by 1/4 of their thickness at the top. In simple colonnades of this order, the spaces or intercolumniations can be quite wide, since the architraves are made of wood. This makes it very suitable for villas, as it allows passage for carts and other country implements, while being cost-effective. When constructing gates or loggias with arches, the measurements indicated in the design should be followed, ensuring that the stones are bonded as they should be. I have also applied this method to the designs of the other 4 orders. This approach to arranging and bonding the stones is derived from many ancient arches, as shown in my Book of Arches, where I have applied great diligence. Plate 1. A. The architrave of wood. B. The joists that form the corona or drip. The pedestals placed under the columns of this order should be plain and 1 module in height. The base height is half the diameter of the column, divided into 2 equal parts, 1 part for the plinth and the other divided into 4 parts. 1 part is for the fillet or cimbia, which may sometimes be smaller. In this order, the fillet is part of the base, whereas in other orders, it is part of the column. The remaining 3 parts are for the torus or baston. The base projection is 1/6 of the column's diameter. The capital height is half the diameter of the lower part of the column, divided into 3 equal parts. 1 part for the abaco, also called the dado due to its shape, 1 part for the ovolo, and the 3rd part divided into 7 parts. 1/7 is for the fillet under the ovolo, and the remaining 6/7 are for the collarino. The astragal height is twice that of the listello or fillet under the listello, with its center on a line that falls perpendicularly on the listello, which also aligns with the projection of the cimbia, matching the thickness of the listello. The capital's projection corresponds to the shaft of the column below. The architrave, made of wood, is equal in height and width, not exceeding the top shaft diameter. The joists forming the granda or drip project 1/4 of the column's length. These measurements for the Tuscan order are as per Vitruvius. Plate 2. A. Abaco, B. Ovolo, C. Collarino, D. Astragal, E. Shaft of the column at the top, F. Shaft of the column below, G. Cimbia or cincture, H. Toro or baston, I. Orlo, K. Pedestal. The profiles near the base and capital plans are the imposts of the arches. When architraves are made of stone, the intercolumniation guidelines must be followed. Ancient buildings such as the Arena of Verona, the Arena and Theatre of Pola, and others retain similar measurements, indicating their formation using this order. I have drawn profiles of the base, capital, architrave, frieze, and cornices from these structures, which are included in the final plate of this chapter, along with the imposts of arches. These designs will also be featured in my books on antiquity. Plate 3a, Gola Derrida, B. Corona, C. Gocciolatoio Gola Dorita, D. Cavetto, E. Fregio or Freeze, F. Architrave, G. Chimacho of the capital, H. Abaco of the capital, I. Gola Dorita of the capital, K. Collarino of the capital, L. Astragal, M. Shaft of the column under the capital, N. Shaft of the column at the bottom, O. Symbia of the column, P. Bastone Angola or Taurus of the base, Q. Orlo of the base. Directly opposite the architrave marked F, there is a profile of an architrave designed with more delicacy. Chapter 15. The Doric Order. The Doric order originates from the Dorians, a Greek nation in Asia. When columns of this order are made without pilasters, they should be 7.5 to 8 diameters in height. The intercolumniations are slightly less than 3 diameters of the column, a spacing called diastylos by Vitruvius. When columns are paired with pilasters, their height should be 17 1/3 modules, including the base and capital. Note that in this order, the module is half the diameter of the column divided into 30 minutes, unlike other orders where the module is the whole diameter divided into 60 minutes. Ancient buildings with this order do not have pedestals, although modern ones do. When a pedestal is required, the dado should be square, and all its ornamentation measurements should be derived from it. The dado is divided into 4 equal parts, 2 for the base, zacco or plinth, 1 for the cymatia with the orlo of the base joined to it. Some pedestals of this kind can still be seen in the Corinthian order at Verona in the arch called De Leoni. I have included various profiles for pedestals of this order, all beautiful and carefully measured from ancient examples. Plate 1, A. Shaft of the column, B. Symbia or fillet, C. Upper torus, D. Cavetto with its listellos, E. Lower torus, F. Plinth or zacco, G. Symbia of the pedestals, H. Dado of the pedestals, I. Base of the pedestals, K. Imposts of arches. The Doric order lacks a unique base, so many edifices feature columns without bases, such as the Theatre of Marcellus in Rome, the Temple della Pieta near the said theatre, the Theatre of Vicenza, and others. However, the Attic base is sometimes added to enhance its beauty. The base height should be half the diameter of the column, divided into 3 equal parts, 1 for the plinth, zocco, the other 2 divided into 4 parts, 1 for the lower torus, another for the cavetto with its listellos, and the remaining 4 parts for the cavetto. The projection is 1/6 of the column's diameter. The symbia is half the upper torus height, projecting 1/3 of the base's total projection if the base is separate from the column. Otherwise, the symbia must be thin. The capital height should be half the diameter of the column, divided into 3 parts. The upper part comprises the abaco and cymatio, with the cymatio being 2 of the 5 parts, divided into 3, 1 for the listello and 2 for the gola. The second principal part is divided into 3, 1 for the anelli or annulets, 3 equal parts, the other 2 for the ovolo, projecting 2/3 of its height. The third part is for the collarino. The capital projection is 1/5 of the column's diameter. The astragal or tondino height matches the 3 anelli, projecting equally to the lower shaft diameter. The symbia height is half the astragal, aligning with the astragal's center projection. The architrave on the capital should be half the column's diameter, 1 module, divided into 7 parts, 1 for the tinea or benda, projecting as much as its height, with the remainder divided into 6 parts, 1 for the gocci, 6 in number, and listello under the tinea, a 3rd part of the gocci. The remainder is divided into 7 parts, 3 for the first fascia, 4 for the second. The frieze height is 1.5 modules, with the triglyph 1 module wide and its capital 1/6 of a module. The triglyph is divided into 6 parts, 2 for the middle channels, 1 for the 2 half channels at the ends, and the remaining 3 for the spaces between. The metopa, or space between triglyphs, should be as wide as it is high. The cornice height is 1 module and 1/6, divided into 5.5 parts, 2 for the cavetto and ovolo, with the cavetto slightly less wide than the ovolo due to the listello width. The remaining 3.5 parts are for the corona or cornice, also known as the gocciolatoio, and the gola or scima recta and reversa. The corona projects 4/6 of the module, with 6 drops, gute, in length and 3 in breadth on its soffit, with listellos over the triglyphs and roses over the metope. The gutta are round, bell-shaped, and match those under the tinea. The gola thickness is 1/8 more than the corona, divided into 8 parts, 2 for the orlo and 6 for the gola, projecting 7.5 parts. The total height of the architrave, frieze, and cornice is 1/4 the column's height. These dimensions, according to Vitruvius, are slightly altered in my designs to enhance certain elements. Plate 2, A. Gola recta, B. Gola reversa, C. Gocciolatoio or corona, D. Ovolo, E. cavetto, F. Capital of the triglyph, G. Triglyph, H. metopa, I. Tania, K. Gocci, L. First fascia, M. Second fascia, Y. Soffit of the Gocciolatoio, parts of the capital, N. Cimascio, O. abaco, P. ovolo, Q. gradetti or annulets, R. collarino, S. astragal, T. U. shaft of the column, X. plan of the capital, and the module divided into 30 minutes. Chapter 16. The Ionic Order. The Ionic Order originated from Ionia, a province in Asia, and it is said that the Temple of Diana at Ephesus was built using this order. The columns, including the capital and base, are 9 modules high. A module is understood to be the lower diameter of the column. The architrave, frieze, and cornice together are 1/5 the height of the column. In simple colonnades, the intercolumniations are 2 1/4 diameters of the column, the most beautiful and commodious spacing called eustylos by Vitruvius. In arch designs, the pilasters are 1/3 of the void, and the arches are 2 squares high. If a pedestal is used with Ionic columns, as in arch designs, it should be as high as half the width of the arch and divided into 7.5 parts, 2 for the base, 1 for the Cimascia, and the remaining 4.5 for the dado, the middle plane. The base of the Ionic order should be half a module thick and divided into 3 parts, 1 for the plinth, with a projection of 1/4 and an 1/8 part of the module, and the other 2 divided into 7 parts, 3 for the bastone or torus, and the remaining 4 split equally for the upper and lower cavetto, with the lower projecting more. The astragal should be 1/8 the height of the cavetto. The cymbia of the column is 1/3 the height of the bastone or torus of the base. If the base is joined with part of the column, the cymbia should be thinner, as mentioned in the Doric order. These dimensions are according to Vitruvius. However, Attic bases are often seen under Ionic columns in ancient buildings, and they are aesthetically pleasing. I have drawn the Attic base on the pedestal, with a small torus under the cymbia, but I have also included the Vitruvian design. Plate 1, A. shaft of the column, B. tondino or astragal with the cymbia and are members of the column, C. upper bastone or torus, D. cavetto, E. lower bastone or torus, F. orlo joined to the Cimascia of the pedestal, G. the Cimascia in 2 different forms of the pedestal, H. dado of the pedestal, I. base of the pedestal in 2 different forms, K. orlo or plinth of the base, L. imposts of the arches. To form the capital, divide the column's base into 18 parts. 19 of these parts is the height and width of the abaco, half of which is the height of the capital with the volute, 9.5 parts high. 1.5 parts are for the abaco with its cimascio, and the remaining 8 parts are for the volute. Allow one of the 19 parts from the extremity to the inside of the cimascio. From this point, draw a perpendicular line dividing the volute in the middle, called the cathito. Where this line intersects the line separating the top 4.5 parts from the lower 3.5 parts is the center of the volute's eye, with a diameter of one of the 8 parts. Draw a line from this point intersecting the cathito at right angles, dividing the volute into 4 parts. Form a square in the eye of the volute, half the diameter of the eye, and draw diagonal lines. The points where these lines intersect are where the fixed foot of the compasses should be placed to form the volute. There are 13 such points, including the center of the eye. The order of these points is shown by the numbers in the design. The astragal of the column aligns with the eye of the volute. The volute's thickness in the middle should equal the ovolo's projection, which extends beyond the abaco, the same distance as the eye of the volute. The volute's channel aligns with the column's shaft. The astragal goes entirely around under the volute, always visible, as shown in the plan. It is natural for a tender feature like the volute to yield to a hard one like the astragal, from which it should always be equally distant. Angular capitals with volutes on both the front and flank are typically used in colonnades and porticos. These are called angular capitals and will be detailed in my book of temples. Plate 2, A abaco, B channel or hollow of the volute, C ovolo, D tondino or astragal under the ovolo, E cimbia, F shaft of the column, G the line called cathado. In the plan of the capital, the said members are countermarked with the same letters. S, the eye of the volute in a larger form. Members of the base, according to Vitruvius, K shaft of the column, L cimbia, M bastone or torus, N first cavetto, O tondini or astragals, P second cavetto, Q orlo or plinth. R projection of the base. The architrave, frieze, and cornice are, as mentioned, 1/5 of the column's height, divided into 12 parts, 4 for the architrave, 3 for the frieze, and 5 for the cornice. The architrave is divided into 5 parts, 1 for the cimasio, the remaining 4 divided into 12, 3 for the first fascia and its astragal, 4 for the second and its astragal, and 5 for the third. The cornice is divided into 7 3/4 parts, 2 for the cavetto and ovolo, 2 for the modillion, and 3 3/4 for the corona and gola or cima. Its projection equals its height. I have designed the front, flank, and plan of the capital, as well as the architrave, frieze, and cornice with their proper ornaments. Plate 3, A gola or cima recta, B gola or cima reversa, C gocciolatoio or corona, D cimascio of the modiglians, E modiglians, F ovolo GKH fregio or frieze, I cimaio of the architrave, K first fascia, second fascia, M third fascia. Members of the capital, N abaco, O hollow of the voluta, P volo Q tondino of the column or astragal, R shaft of the column. The soffit of the cornice is where the roses are placed between the modillions. Chapter 17 of the Corinthian Order. The Corinthian order, more beautiful and elegant than the previous orders, originated in Corinth, a noble city in Peloponnesus. The columns, including the base and capital, are 9.5 modules high. When fluted, they should have 24 channels or flutes, with each flute's depth being half its width. The spaces between 2 flutes should be 1/3 of the width of the flutes. The architrave, frieze, and cornice are 1/5 of the column's height. In a simple colonnade design, the intercolumniations are 2 diameters, as seen in the portico of St. Maria la Rotonda in Rome. This arrangement is called systylos by Vitruvius. In arch designs, the pilasters are 2/5 of the void, which is 2.5 squares, including the arch's thickness. Pedestals for Corinthian columns should be 1/4 the height of the columns, divided into 8 parts, 1 for the cimassia, 2 for the base, and the remaining 5 for the dado. The base is divided into 3 parts, 2 for the zacco or plinth, and 1 for the cornice or molding. The Attic base is typically used for these columns, differing from that of the Doric order, with a projection of 1/5 of the column's diameter. This base may vary in other parts, as seen in the design, where the imposts of the arches are also profiled. The height of these imposts is 1.5 times the thickness of the pilasters supporting the arch. Plate A, shaft of the column, B, cimbia or cincture, and tondino or astragal of the column, C, upper bastone or torus, D, cavetto with its astragal, E, lower bastone or torus, F, orlo of the base joined to the cimascia of the pedestal, G, cimascia of the pedestal, H, dado of the pedestal, I, cornice of the base, K, orlo of the base. The imposts of the arches are shown beside the column. The height of the Corinthian capital should be the column's lower diameter plus 1/6, allocated to the abaco. The remainder is divided into 3 equal parts. The first for the first leaf, the second for the second leaf, and the third divided into 2 for the caulacoli or stems and their leaves, which seem to support the abaco. The campana, the body of the capital under the leaves, should fall directly perpendicular with the bottom of the flutes of the columns. To form the abaco and give it a suitable projection, draw a square with each side measuring 1.5 modules. Within this square, draw diagonal lines intersecting at the center, where the compasses are placed. Mark a module towards each corner, draw lines intersecting the diagonals at right angles, and these will define the projection bounds. This length also determines the width of the horns of the abaco. The curvature or tapering is made by drawing a thread from one horn to the other. The intersection of the triangle's base, formed by this taper, guides the line from the horn extremities to the astragal or tondino of the column. The leaf tips should touch this line or slightly project beyond it. The rose width should be 1/4 of the column's lower diameter. The architrave, frieze, and cornice are, as mentioned, 1/5 of the column's height divided into 12 parts like the Ionic order. However, the cornice is divided into 8.5 parts, one for the intavolato or cima reversa, one for the dentello or dentils, one for the ovolo, 2 for the modillion, and 3.5 for the corona and gola. The cornice projection equals its height. The panels for the roses between the modillions should be square, and the modillions half as wide as the lane of the roses. The members of this order are not marked with letters, as they can be easily identified by comparison with the previous orders. Chapter 18. The Composite Order. The Composite Order, also known as the Latin Order due to its Roman origins, combines elements from both the Ionic and Corinthian orders. It is more slender than the Corinthian order and can be formed similarly in all parts except for the capital. The columns should be 10 modules high. In simple colonnade designs, the intercolumniations are 1.5 diameters, a spacing called pianostylos by Vitruvius. In arch designs, the pilasters are half the width of the arch void, and the arches are 2.5 squares high under the vault. Because this order should be more slender than the Corinthian, its pedestal is 1/3 the height of the column, divided into 8.5 parts, 1 part for the cymasia, 2 parts for the base, and 5.5 parts for the dado. The base of the pedestal is divided into 3 parts, 2 parts for the zocco or plinth, and 1 part for its bastone and gola. The attic base can serve for the composite column, as with the Corinthian order, or it can be formed by combining the Attic and Ionic bases, as shown in the design. The profile of the impost of the arches is on one side of the dado of the pedestal, with a height equal to the thickness of the member. The dimensions of the composite capital are the same as those of the Corinthian, but differ in the volute, ovolo, and fusarolo, which are elements borrowed from the Ionic order. The capital is divided into 3 parts from the abaco downwards, 1 part for the first leaf, the second for the second leaf, and the third for the volute. The volute is formed similarly to the Ionic volute, taking up part of the abaco so that it appears to grow from the ovolo near the central flower. The ovolo's thickness is 3 parts in 5 of the abaco. The lower part of the ovolo begins parallel with the lower part of the volute's eye and projects 3 parts of 4 of its height, perpendicular to or slightly beyond the abaco's curvature. The fusarolo, 1/3 the height of the ovolo, projects slightly more than half its thickness and encircles the capital under the volute. The gradetto under the fusarolo, forming the orlo of the campana of the capital, is half the height of the fusarolo. The campana's body aligns directly with the bottom of the column flutes. I have taken these dimensions from a particularly beautiful example of this order in Rome. Other variations of composite capitals, which I will detail in my books on antiquity, also exist. The architrave, frieze, and cornice together are 1/5 of the column's height. Their proportions and divisions can be understood from the descriptions of other orders and from the numbers in the designs. Chapter 19. Pedestals. I have discussed the essential aspects of plain walls and their ornaments, including the various pedestals suitable for each architectural order. Although the ancients did not consistently vary the size of pedestals for different orders, a well-designed pedestal significantly enhances the ornamentation and beauty of a structure. To ensure architects can competently use pedestals in various contexts, it's important to note that the ancients sometimes made pedestals square, with equal height and width, as seen in the Arch of Leone at Verona. I have assigned this type to the Doric order due to its requirement for solidity. In other cases, they based pedestal dimensions on the opening, such as in the Arch of Titus at Santa Maria Nova in Rome, and the Arch of Trajan over the port of Ancona, where the pedestal height is half the arch's void. This type of pedestal is placed in the Ionic order. Alternatively, dimensions could be derived from the column height, as seen in the arch erected in honor of Augustus Caesar at Susa, the Arch of Pola, and the amphitheater in Rome, where the pedestal height is 1/4 of the column height. This proportion is observed in the Corinthian order. In the Arch of Castelvecchio at Verona, an exceptionally beautiful example, the pedestal height is 1/3 of the column height, which I have assigned to the composite order. These proportions provide the most aesthetically pleasing forms of pedestals. Vitruvius, in his 6th book, mentions the poggio in the context of theaters. The poggio is equivalent to the pedestal, being 1/3 the length of the column and serving as an ornament to the scene. However, there are examples of pedestals exceeding 1/3 of the column height, such as in the Arch of Constantine at Rome, where pedestals are 2/5 of the column height. It was common in ancient pedestals to make the base twice as thick as the cymasia, a detail that will be further illustrated in my Book of Arches. Chapter 20. Abuses. Having laid down the principles of architectural ornamentation, including the 5 orders, and shown how each should be constructed according to ancient practices, it is important to highlight many abuses introduced by later architects, which are still followed today. This guidance aims to help those studying this art avoid such errors in their work and recognize them in others. Architecture, like other arts, imitates nature and should not deviate from what is agreeable to nature. Ancient architects, transitioning from wooden to stone buildings, ensured columns were thicker at the bottom than at the top, mimicking trees that are thicker near the root than at the top. Bases were placed under columns to give the impression of being crushed under the weight they support, reflecting the natural depression seen in objects under great weight. Similarly, elements like triglyphs, modillions, and dentils in cornices were introduced to represent the ends of beams supporting floors and roofs. Every architectural element should serve a purpose and adhere to nature's simplicity. Therefore, placing cartouches, cartelli, instead of columns or pilasters to support weight is both impractical and visually confusing. Cartouches projecting from cornices are equally illogical, as they do not represent structural elements and add unnecessary expense. All cornice parts should appear functional, as if the entire structure were made of wood. A great weight requires solid support, making decorative scrolls, cartocci, unsuitable for structural purposes. They should not be used to support heavy elements, as they are inherently soft and fragile. A significant error is making broken frontispieces over doors, windows, and loggias, which are meant to protect from rain. Ancient builders designed them to close and swell in the middle for effective protection. Dividing such protective elements is irrational and contrary to their purpose. While novelty can be appealing, it should not contradict the precepts of art and reason. The ancients varied their designs but adhered to universal and necessary rules of art, as will be evident in my books of antiquities. Another common abuse is the excessive projection of cornices and other ornaments. When they extend too far, especially in confined spaces, they create a narrow, oppressive environment and can appear threatening, as if they might fall. Similarly, disproportionate cornices on columns, either too large or too small, create an unbalanced and displeasing appearance. Columns should not be divided with annulets or garlands, as these elements compromise the column's perceived strength and solidity. The more robust and unified the columns appear, the better they fulfill their purpose of providing structural support. Many other such abuses exist, including disproportionate cornice elements, which can be identified and avoided based on the principles discussed here and previously. It is now time to focus on the disposition of particular and principal places within architectural structures. Chapter 21. The loggias, entries, halls, rooms, and of their form. Loggias are typically situated at the front or back of the house and are positioned in the middle when only one is present, or on each side when there are two. These loggias serve various purposes, such as walking, dining, and other recreational activities. Their size can vary according to the building's requirements, but they are generally not less than 10 feet wide and not more than 20 feet wide. Well-designed houses often feature a central space that connects all other areas. These spaces are called entries on the lower floor and halls on the upper floors and are considered public areas. Entries, positioned as the first part of the house, except for the loggias, provide a convenient waiting area for visitors and those conducting business with the homeowner. Halls, on the other hand, are used for gatherings, entertainment, weddings, and other events, and should therefore be larger and more spacious to accommodate many people comfortably. Halls should ideally not exceed twice their width in length, and the closer they are to a square shape, the more convenient and commendable they will be. Rooms should be distributed on either side of the entry and hall, with the right side corresponding to the left, ensuring symmetry and balance in the structure. This equal distribution helps the walls bear the roof's weight uniformly, preventing potential structural weaknesses that could lead to significant issues over time. The most beautiful and proportionate room shapes are 7 in total, as follows: 1. Round, though rarely used. 2. Square. 3. The length being the diagonal of the square. 4. The length being 1 1/3 times the width. 5. The length being 1 1/2 times the width. 6. The length being 1 2/3 times the width. 7. The length being twice the width. By adhering to these proportions and arrangements, the structure will maintain both beauty and functionality. Chapter 22, on pavements and ceilings. Having discussed the forms of loggias, halls, and rooms, it is proper to address their pavements and ceilings. Pavements can be made of terrazzo, bricks, or live stones. Terrazzo floors, commonly used in Venice, are excellent when made of pounded bricks, small gravel, and lime from river pebbles or well-pounded Padua lime. They should be installed in spring or summer to allow proper drying. Brick floors are aesthetically pleasing and versatile due to the various forms and colors bricks can take, depending on the type of chalk used. Live stone floors are rarely used in chambers because they are very cold in winter, but they are well suited for loggias and public places. When designing chamber floors, it is important to ensure that rooms adjacent to one another have even floors. The thresholds of doors should be flush with the rest of the chamber floor. If a small room or closet does not align in height with the main chamber, a mezzanine or false floor should be constructed. Ceilings are constructed in various styles. Many prefer ceilings made of beautiful, well-wrought beams. It is important to space these beams 1 1/2 times their thickness apart. This spacing makes the ceilings visually appealing and provides enough wall space between the beam ends to support the structure above. If the beams are spaced too far apart, the ceiling will look unattractive. If too close, it may weaken the wall, risking collapse if the beams rot or burn. Other ceilings may feature stucco or wood compartments, often adorned with pictures. These can be decorated according to various designs and preferences, so there is no single rule for this style. By following these guidelines, the pavements and ceilings will not only be functional, but also add to the overall beauty and integrity of the building. Chapter 23, on the height of the rooms. Rooms can have either a flat ceiling or a vaulted ceiling. If the ceiling is flat, the height from the floor to the ceiling should equal the room's width. For rooms on upper floors, the height should be reduced by 1/6 compared to the rooms below. For vaulted rooms, typically found on the first floor because they are more fire-resistant and aesthetically pleasing, the height depends on the room's dimensions. For square rooms, the vault height should be 1/3 greater than the room's width. For rooms longer than they are wide, the height should be proportionate to both dimensions. This can be determined by adding the length and width of the room and dividing the total by 2. For example, if a room is 12 feet long and 6 feet wide, adding these gives 18 feet, and half of this is 9 feet, which should be the vault height. Alternatively, a height proportionate to both length and width can be found geometrically. Add the length to the width and divide the result in half. Using this midpoint as the center, draw a semicircle extending from the room's width to its length. The intersection of this semicircle with an extended line from the width will give the vault height. Mathematically, if a room is 9 feet long and 4 feet wide, the vault height can be found by taking the square root of the product of the length and width, 36 in this case, resulting in a vault height of 6 feet. This method, however, may not always yield whole numbers. Another method involves drawing the room's dimensions and using geometric principles to find a proportionate height. For example, extend the room's length until it intersects with a diagonal line drawn from the width, providing the vault height. Using these methods ensures that rooms of different dimensions can have vaults of equal height, maintaining proportionality and aesthetic appeal. This uniformity also benefits the floors above by keeping them level. Some vault heights may not fit these rules and are left to the architect's discretion, allowing for flexibility and creativity based on necessity and judgment. Chapter 24, The several manners of vaults. There are 6 types of vaults: crossed, fasciated, flat, vaults that are a portion of a circle and do not reach a semicircle, circular, groined, and shell-like. All these vaults should be 1/3 of the room's width in height. The last 2 types, groined and shell-like, are modern inventions, while the first 4 were used by the ancients. Circular vaults. Circular vaults are made in square rooms. They are constructed by leaving mutuals in the room's corners to support the semicircle of the vault. The center of the vault is flat, becoming more circular towards the corners. An example of such a vault is found in the baths of Titus in Rome, though it was partly ruined when I observed it. Below are the forms of all these different vault types, applied to various room shapes. 1. Crossed vaults. These vaults intersect at right angles, creating a cross pattern at the top. They are commonly used in larger spaces that require additional support at the intersection points. 2. Fasciated vaults. Characterized by parallel bands or fascia, these vaults add visual interest and structural reinforcement through their segmented appearance. 3. Flat vaults. Flat vaults do not reach a full semicircle, making them suitable for rooms with lower ceilings or where a less pronounced curve is desired. They provide a gentle arch that is less imposing. 4. Circular vaults. In square rooms, circular vaults utilize mutuals at the corners to support a semicircular structure. The center remains flat while the curvature increases toward the corners. These vaults are visually striking and offer a sense of grandeur. 5. Groined vaults. Modern in design, groined vaults are created by intersecting 2 barrel vaults at right angles. This design provides additional support and creates a visually interesting pattern of intersecting arches. 6. Shell-like vaults. Another modern invention, shell-like vaults mimic the shape of a seashell. They provide a unique and organic aesthetic, often used in contemporary architecture for their dramatic and flowing appearance. Each of these vault types can be adapted to suit different room shapes, enhancing both the structural integrity and aesthetic appeal of the space. The choice of vault type depends on the architectural requirements and the desired visual effect. Chapter 25. The dimensions of the doors and windows. No strict rule can be given for the height and width of principal doors in buildings or for the doors and windows of rooms. In designing principal doors, the architect should consider the size of the building, the status of the owner, and the nature of items to be moved in and out. A useful guideline, as taught by Vitruvius in the 6th chapter of his 4th book, is to divide the space from the floor to the top of the joists into 3½ parts. Allocate 2 parts to the height and 1 part to the width of the opening, subtracting 1/12 of the height for the final measurement. Ancient builders often made doors narrower at the top than at the bottom for added strength, as seen in the temple at Tivoli and as suggested by Vitruvius. The principal door should be placed where it can be easily accessed from all parts of the house. For room doors, the width should not exceed 3 feet and 6½ feet in height, nor be less than 2 feet wide and 5 feet high. Windows should be designed to provide adequate lighting without excessive heat or cold. The size and number of windows should match the room's size, as a larger room needs more light. If windows are too small or too few, the room will be dim. If too large, the room will be uncomfortable due to excessive airflow, influenced by the room's orientation. Windows should not be wider than 1/4 nor narrower than 1/5 of the room's width. Their height should be 2 squares plus 1/6 of their width. Even if rooms vary in size within the same story, the windows should be uniform. For instance, in a room with a width of 18 feet and a length of 30 feet, divide the width into 4½ parts. 1 part is for the window's width, and 2 parts plus 1/6 of the width are for the height. Use these dimensions for all windows in other rooms. Windows on upper stories should be a 1/6 part shorter in height than those below. Windows should align vertically and horizontally for aesthetic consistency and structural integrity. The lintels or architraves of doors and windows should not bear excessive weight. Segmental arches can help distribute the load, enhancing the building's durability. Windows should be kept away from building corners to maintain structural strength. The pilasters or jambs of doors and windows should be between 1/6 and 1/5 the width of the opening. Next, we will discuss the ornaments for these elements. Chapter 26. The Ornaments of Doors and Windows. The ornaments of principal doors in a building can be guided by Vitruvius's teachings in the 6th chapter of his 4th book, as well as by the designs and suggestions of the Most Reverend Barbaro. Additionally, the profiles of all 5 orders that I have discussed and designed so far will be useful. However, here I will provide specific profiles for the ornaments of room doors and windows, showing how each element should be proportioned and projected for a graceful appearance. The main ornaments for doors and windows are the architrave, frieze, and cornice. The architrave surrounds the door and should match the thickness of the jambs and pilasters, which should be no less than 1/6 and no more than 1/5 of the width of the opening. The frieze and cornice derive their thickness from the architrave. First design. 1. Architrave. Divide the architrave into 4 parts. 3 parts for the height of the frieze, 5 parts for the height of the cornice. Divide the architrave further into 10 parts, 3 for the first fascia, 4 for the second fascia, the remaining 3 divided into 5, 2 for the regolo, orlo, 3 for the gola reversa, intavolato. 2. Frieze. Height is 3 parts of the 4 of the architrave, marked with a segment of a circle less than half a circle, coming to the samos of the architrave. 3. Cornice. 5 parts divided as follows: 1 part to the cavetto and its listello, 1/5 of the cavetto. Cavetto projects 2 parts in 3 of its height. Mark it with a triangle, placing the fixed point of the compasses in the angle opposite the base to draw the curved lines. 1 part to the ovolo, projecting 2 parts in 3 of its height. 3 parts divided into 17, 8 for the corona gocciolatoio with its listelli, 9 for the gola dorita and its orlo. 4 members of the cornice, OI, cavetto OK, ovolo, OL, gocciolatoio, ON, gola, O, orlo. 5 members of the architrave, OP, intavolato or gola reversa, OQ, first fascia, OV, second fascia, R, orlo, OS, swelling of the frieze, OT, part of the frieze that goes into the wall. Second design. 1 architrave, divided into 4 parts, 3 parts for the height of the frieze, 5 parts for the height of the cornice. Divide the architrave further into 3 parts, 2 parts subdivided into 7, 3 for the first fascia, 4 for the second fascia, the third part divided into 9, 2 for the tontino, 7 subdivided into 5, 3 for the intavolato, 2 for the ovolo. 2. Cornice, divided into 5 3/4 parts, 1 part divided into 6, 5 for the intavolato over the frieze, 1 for the listello, 1 part for the ovolo, 3 parts divided into 17, 8 for the gocciolatoio, 9 divided into 4, 3 for the gola, 1 for the orlo, 3/4 part divided into 5 1/2, 1 for the gradetto, 4 1/2 for the intavolato over the gocciolatoio. Additional designs. 1. Architrave, F, divided into 4 parts, 3 1/4 parts for the height of the frieze, 5 parts for the height of the cornice, architrave divided into 8 parts, 5 for the piano, 3 for the samascio, samascio divided into 8 parts, 3 for the intavolato, 3 for the cavetto, 2 for the orlo. 2. Cornice, divided into 6 parts, 2 for the gola dorita with its orlo, 1 for the intavolato, gola divided into 9 parts, 8 for the gocciolatoio and gradetto. Astragal or tondino over the frieze is 1/3 of one of the 6 parts. 3. Architrave, H, divided into 4 parts, 3 1/2 parts for the height of the frieze, 5 parts for the height of the cornice. Architrave divided into 8 parts, 5 for the piano, 3 for the samascio, samascio divided into 7 parts, 1 for the astragallo. Remainder divided into 8, 3 for the gola reversa, 3 for the cavetto, 2 for the orlo. 4. Cornice, divided into 6 3/4 parts, 3 parts for the intavolato, dentello, and ovolo. Projection equal to its thickness. 3/4 part for the intavolato between the gola and gocciolatoio. 3 parts divided into 17, 9 for the gola and orlo, 8 for the gocciolatoio. These profiles ensure that doors and windows are both functional and aesthetically pleasing, adhering to classical principles while allowing for creative expression. Chapter 27 of Chimneys. The ancients warmed their rooms in the following manner. they constructed chimneys in the middle of the room, supported by columns or modiglions. These columns supported the architraves, upon which sat the pyramid of the chimney through which the smoke exited. Examples of such chimneys can be seen at Baiae near Nero's Piscina, and another near Civitavecchia. When they opted not to have visible chimneys, they built tubes or pipes within the walls. These tubes conveyed heat from fires located below the rooms, with the heat emerging from vents or holes at the top of these pipes. Similarly, the Trentini, gentlemen of Vicenza, cool their rooms in the summer at their villa in Custozza. In the mountains of the villa, there are large caves known locally as quali, which were once quarries. These caves generate very cool winds, which are then conveyed to their houses through subterranean vaults called ventiducts. Using pipes similar to those used for heating, they direct this cool wind through the rooms, controlling the airflow by opening or closing the vents according to the season. Additionally, there is a remarkable feature known as the Prison of the Winds, a subterranean room constructed by the excellent Signor Francesco Trento, known as Aeolia. This room, designed to capture the cool winds from the ventiducts, has been exquisitely adorned and is a testament to Trento's dedication and investment. Returning to chimneys, we typically construct them within the thickness of the walls, extending their funnel of the roofs to ensure the smoke is effectively carried away. The funnels should not be too wide or too narrow. If too wide, air turbulence can push smoke back down into the room. If too narrow, the restricted passage can cause smoke to choke and return. For room chimneys, the funnels should not be less than half a foot wide, nor more than 9 inches, with a length of 2.5 feet. The mouth of the pyramid, where it connects to the funnel, should be slightly narrower to impede any descending smoke from entering the room. Some designs incorporate a crooked funnel to utilize the force of the fire to prevent smoke from returning. The top of the chimneys, where the smoke exits, should be wide and positioned away from combustible materials. The mantle trees, upon which the chimney pyramids are constructed, should be finely crafted and far from rustic. Rustic work is only appropriate in very large edifices for reasons previously discussed. Chapter 28. Stairs and the various kinds of them, and of the number and size of the steps. Great care should be taken in the placement of staircases, as finding a suitable location that does not impede the rest of the structure can be quite challenging. Therefore, a primary location should be assigned to them, ensuring they do not obstruct other spaces nor are obstructed by them. Staircases require 3 openings. The first is the door through which one accesses the staircase, which should be easily visible to those entering the house. Ideally, it should be in a location where one can see the most beautiful part of the house before reaching it, giving the impression of a larger house. However, it should be obvious and easy to find. The second opening is the windows necessary to illuminate the steps. These should be placed in the middle and high enough to spread light evenly. The third opening is the entrance to the floor above, which should lead to ample, beautiful, and adorned spaces. Staircases will be commendable if they are clear, spacious, and easy to ascend, inviting people to use them. They will be clear if they are well lit and if the light is evenly distributed. They will be sufficiently spacious if they do not appear cramped relative to the size and quality of the building. However, they should never be narrower than 4 feet, allowing 2 people to pass each other comfortably. They will be convenient for the building if the arches beneath them can be used for storage, and for people if the ascent is not too steep. Therefore, their length should be twice their height. The steps should not be higher than 6 inches. If they are made lower, especially on long staircases, it will make the ascent easier and less tiring. However, they should never be lower than 4 inches. The breadth of the steps should be between 1 foot and 1.5 feet. The ancients made the steps uneven in number so that one would start and end with the right foot, which was considered a good omen and a sign of greater devotion when entering a temple. The number of steps should not exceed 11 or 13 before a landing is provided, allowing the weak or weary to rest and facilitating the retrieval of any items that might fall. Staircases can be straight or winding. Straight staircases can spread into 2 branches or turn into 4 branches, dividing the space into 4 parts, with 2 for the steps and 2 for the void in the middle, which provides light if left uncovered. These can be made with or without an internal wall. Winding staircases, also called chiocchiola, can be round or oval, with or without a central column. In narrow spaces, they are advantageous as they occupy less room but are more challenging to ascend. The most effective designs are those void in the middle, allowing light from above and visibility for those ascending or descending. For staircases with a central column, the diameter should be divided into 7 parts, 3 for the column and 4 for the steps. Crooked steps, as shown in Design B, are aesthetically pleasing and longer than straight ones. For void staircases, the diameter is divided into 4 parts, 2 for the steps and 2 for the void in the middle. Signor Marc Antonio Barbaro invented another type of winding staircase suitable for narrow spaces, which lacks a central column. Due to the crooked steps, they are very long and must be divided similarly. Oval staircases are divided like round ones and are visually appealing as all windows and doors align with the head of the oval and the middle, making them sufficiently commodious. I constructed a void staircase in the Monastery della Carità in Venice, which has been very successful. Other notable winding staircases include those at Chambord in France, built by order of King Francis I, featuring 4 staircases with 4 entrances, serving 4 apartments without interfering with each other. This innovative design allows for visibility of all occupants without inconvenience. In the porticos of Pompey in Rome, near Piazza Judea, 3 winding staircases were ingeniously placed in the middle, receiving light only from above. Inspired by these, Bramante created a staircase in Belvedere without steps, incorporating the 4 architectural orders, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, and Composite. Such staircases are divided into 4 parts, with 2 for the void in the middle and 1 on each side for the steps and columns. Triangular staircases, like those leading to the cupola of Santa Maria Rotonda, are void in the middle and receive light from above. Magnificent double staircases, such as those at Santo Apostolo in Rome, lead to Montecavallo. These staircases led to a temple atop the mountain, as I will illustrate in my Book of Temples. The last design is of this type. Plate 1a. The winding staircase with a column in the middle B. The winding staircase with a column and with crooked steps. C. The winding staircase void in the middle. D. The winding staircase void in the middle and with crooked steps. E. The oval staircase with the column in the middle. F. The oval staircase without a column. G. The straight staircase with the wall within H. The straight staircase without the wall. Another beautiful sort of winding stairs was made at Chambord, a place in France, by order of the magnanimous King Francis, in a palace by him erected in a wood, and is in this manner. There are 4 staircases which have 4 entrances, that is, 1 each, and ascend the one over the other in such a manner that, being made in the middle of the fabric, they can serve to 4 apartments, without that the inhabitants of the one go down the staircase of the other, and being open in the middle, all see one another going up and down, without giving one another the least inconvenience. And because it is a new and beautiful invention, I have inserted it and marked the staircases with letters in the plan and elevation, that one may see where they begin and how they go up. There were also in the porticos of Pompey in Rome, going into the Piazza Judea, 3 winding staircases of a very laudable invention, because being placed in the middle, where they could receive no light but from above, they were made upon columns, that the light might spread equally everywhere. In imitation of these, Bramante, a most excellent architect in his time, made one in Belvedere without steps and with the 4 orders in architecture, that is, the Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, and Composite. To make such staircases, the whole space is to be divided into 4 parts. 2 are given to the void in the middle, and 1 of a side to the steps and columns. Many other sorts of staircases are to be seen in ancient edifices, such as triangular. Of this kind are the stairs that lead to the cupola of Santa Maria Rotonda, and are void in the middle and receive the light from above. Those were also very magnificent that are at Santo Apostolo in the said city, and go up to Monte Cavallo. Those staircases were double, from which many have since taken example, and did lead to a temple placed on the top of the mountain, as I shall show in my Book of Temples, and the last design is of this sort. Chapter 29, Roofs. The walls being raised up to their summit, the vaults made, the joists of the floors laid, the staircases built, and all other accommodations completed as previously mentioned, it becomes necessary to construct the roof. The roof, which encompasses every part of the fabric, presses equally upon the walls with its weight, acting as a kind of ligament for the whole structure. Besides defending the inhabitants from rain, snow, the scorching sun, and the moisture of the night, it significantly aids in casting off water from the walls during rain. Although such water may seem harmless, it can, in time, cause significant damage. Our forefathers, as noted by Vitruvius, initially made the roofs of their habitations flat. However, upon realizing that flat roofs did not provide adequate protection from rain, they began to construct them with ridges, raised in the middle out of necessity. These ridges should be higher or lower depending on the climate of the region. For instance, in Germany, where heavy snowfall is common, the roofs are made very acute and covered with shingles or very thin tiles. Such roofs, if made otherwise, would collapse under the weight of the snow. In more temperate regions, roofs should be constructed to balance aesthetics with functionality, ensuring they efficiently carry off rainwater. The optimal height for a roof ridge can be determined by dividing the width of the area to be roofed into 9 parts and assigning 2 parts to the height of the ridge. If the ridge height equals a fourth of the width, the roof becomes too steep, making it difficult to fasten tiles. Conversely, if the ridge height equals a fifth of the width, the roof becomes too flat, risking structural integrity under snowfall. Gutters are usually installed around the house to collect water from the tiles and direct it away from the walls through spouts. These gutters should be supported by 1.5 feet of wall above them to ensure they remain secure and to protect the roof timber from water damage. There are various methods of arranging the timber for roofs. When middle walls support the beams, the process is simplified, and this method is particularly favorable. It reduces the load on the outer walls, and even if some beams rot at the head, the roof remains stable and secure.
Thank you for joining us until the end of the book. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to our channel for similar content in the future.